Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get restarted with this next topic of the 5 Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. But before I do, there's a couple questions at break, and there's one gentleman that didn't get a chance to ask his question, so I'm going to let him ask his question so that I can answer it, and then you guys can all benefit from that as well. So if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes. So we said before the unconditional loving. Unconditionally loving, you need to have unconditional love towards every human being. But I wanted to know, then how do you distinguish this unconditional love to everyone to a person that you want to make a bigger part of your life?
Sure. So the love that I'm talking about, this unconditional love, love without attachment, true love, you will love everybody equally. You won't have a difference love. So like my son and my wife, I love them the same way as I love you, but my role is different in their life, right? If my son needs to go to the hospital or go to school or whatever, I need to take him to school. I need to take him to the hospital, things like this. If you needed help and you didn't have someone to help you, surely I would do that for you if I'm able to do that. But my love is the same. My role is just different in these relationships. So when you understand what love is, which is this genuine interest in all beings being well, then I can have this genuine interest in seeing you be well, and I can have this interest in my son being well, where at the same time I understand my role in his life is different than it is with you. For you, I'm a teacher that's helping you to learn the teachings of the Buddha. But if you had this need to go to the hospital, you probably have other people in your life that are able to do that for you. But if for some reason you didn't and you needed help, yeah, I'm here to help you. I would definitely do that for you. But the love is the same amongst all beings.
I was talking more about new relationship. Like if in general, like in the future, how do you have an unconditional love towards everyone, but how do you make a person become a special part of your life? Not only romantic, it can be also friendship. Like how do you make that? Because you love pretty much everyone at the same. How does a person become a special person in your life?
It's up to each person to decide for themselves. So if you have love for all beings, whether someone decides to be part of your life or not, and as you're describing a special part of your life, it's their decision, right? So whether you choose to be a student and learn with me or not, it's your decision. It's not my decision. I'm not making you part of my life. You're choosing to be part of my life. So it's other people's choice of whether they're going to be part of your life or not. Your choice in your mind is, I'm just going to love all beings equally. I'm going to treat all beings equally. I'm going to have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be equal. And if someone would like to be part of my life, then they choose to be part of my life. And if they're choosing not to be part of my life, then they choose not to be part of my life. It's not up to you to decide that for other people. You can just spend time with all beings and think of all beings equally and love all beings equally. And if someone chooses to spend time with you, great, and spend time with them. And if they don't, then that's fine too. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on. Any other questions on this topic? No? Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to this new topic of the 5 Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've been kind of dabbling in the teachings of the Buddha, you might have heard people say that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. This isn't what the Buddha taught, and this isn't how a Buddha actually teaches. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments, and a Buddha actually doesn't teach that way. You're going to see the original words of the Buddha of what he actually teaches based on the 5 precepts. These are 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely, and they're either going to produce wholesome results or unwholesome results. What he's essentially teaching you in these 5 precepts is he's teaching you the natural law of Kamma. This natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, like we were talking about in our previous talk. It's this action and result. When you make decisions wisely, it will produce wholesome Kamma or wholesome results. But when you make decisions unwisely, it's going to produce unwholesome unwholesome results or unwholesome kamma. So the Buddha in the Five Precepts is teaching you about 5 impactful things that you could make wise decisions and experience wholesome results, or unwise decisions and experience unwholesome results. Now, a role of a Buddha and the role of a Buddhist teacher, we're not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in your life. That's for you to decide. You make all the decisions in your life yourself. What our role is to teach you this natural law of Kamma, and then you decide for yourself how you would like to navigate it. So what I'm going to teach you is these 5 decisions, these 5 things that the Buddha taught to be able to help illustrate certain aspects of the path, to be able to help you understand that there's certain ways that you can make decisions wise and unwise, but it's going to be unique to you. It's not going to be like everybody should do it this way or everybody should do it that way. Part of moving to a higher consciousness or the enlightened mental state is to be able to take in any variables of any given situation, use your wisdom, and then come up with a wise decision in a particular situation. And for you, making a wise decision might be one way, and for somebody else, it might be another way. But you need this kind of baseline understanding of this natural law of Kamma in order to be able to come to that wise decision. So I'm going to walk you through these 5 precepts and helping you to understand these, and then I'm going to apply it to day-to-day life so that you can see how to make wise decisions. But what you choose to do in your life is up to you. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but just help you understand the natural law of Kamma, because it's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. So I'll show you how this goes with this first precept. These are the words of the Buddha. He says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, it's important that you investigate and examine his teachings. And when you see he's teaching something here, he's teaching to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Well, the first thing you should ask yourself is, what's a living being? How do I determine what a living being is? Because we're not interested in assuming anything, right? Don't just assume that you understand what a living being is. So the Buddha gives a teaching in other parts of his teachings. It's called the 5 aggregates, or you might think of them as the 5 criteria or the 5 elements. These are the 5 things that determine what a living being is. And this is what you typically learn when you're learning about how to determine what a living being is. Because anytime you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. And that's why he's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So I'll teach you guys what the 5 aggregates are so you can determine what a living being is. A living being is going to have 5 things. They're going to have physical form. They're going to have feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. I'll explain to you what these are. The physical form is the physical form. Like, you know, you're a living being, so you can reflect on this as I'm teaching it to you. Physical form is the physical structures, right? A living being is going to have physical structures. Then a living being is going to have feelings. This is like the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, these kinds of feelings. A living being is going to have some amount of feelings. Then there's going to be then there's going to be perceptions. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world. You're going to look out at the world and have certain views and opinions. That's a perception that you have. And these perceptions may or may not actually be true, but you have certain views and opinions about the world. Then there's volitional formations. What this is choices and decisions. A living being is going to be able to make choices and decisions. They're going to have free will choice. Then there's a consciousness, or the mind. So a living being is going to have physical form, feelings, perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then they're going to have a consciousness, or the mind. So you know that you're a living being, and you can see that you have all 5 of these. You can independently verify what I'm teaching you is that you have all 5 of these things. And you can also look at other beings, like a squirrel, a snake, a bird. They have all 5 of these aggregates, right? And you can apply this to all different parts of your life to be able to see what a living being is. But then to independently verify this further, you can look at something that you know is not a living being, like this chair that I'm sitting in. Ask yourself, does it have physical form? Shaking your head, yeah, it has physical form, right? Does it have feelings? Doesn't have feelings, right? Does it have perceptions, like views and opinions about the world? No, it sure doesn't, right? Does it have volitional formations? Can it choose to pick itself up and walk down the street and put itself? No, it can't, right? Does it have a consciousness or a mind? It doesn't, right? So you can see that this definition of the five aggregates has held up for 2,500 years. The Buddha is giving you the guidance of how to determine what a living being is. So you'd like to penetrate into the five aggregates because this is the natural laws, and this is going to help you determine what a living being is. But in the meantime, if you're having any trouble and any challenges discovering what a living being is, you might use this. This isn't true in all situations. That's why it's not part of the natural laws. But I help students to understand it, that if a being comes from an egg, a sperm, and a consciousness, then it's a living being, right? But there are living beings that meet the five aggregates that don't come from an egg, a sperm, and a conscious, or they don't have an egg and a sperm. They have a consciousness, but they don't come from an egg and a sperm. So this can be like a shorthand way to think about it for now, but ultimately you would like to know the five aggregates and be able to apply that. Because as I mentioned, anytime you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So you would like to get to the point where you can identify what is a living being. Because there's language that we use in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom of the five aggregates that we will sometimes say things like, I'm going to kill this bacteria in my body, or I'm going to kill this virus, or I'm going to kill this plant, or don't kill that plant, right? Or don't kill that tree. Well, we can't kill something that's not a living being. So we're not really killing the bacteria or the virus. What we're doing is we're eliminating it out of the body. That's what we're doing. And it's producing wholesome kamma. When you kill a living being, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So one of the ways you can see that a virus and a bacteria is not a living being is because when you eliminate it, it actually doesn't produce any unwholesome kamma. There's no unwholesome results. There's actually wholesome results. So a bacteria or virus doesn't have all five aggregates. It has a physical form, but it doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have perceptions, it doesn't have volitional formations, and it doesn't have a consciousness. And that's why when you eliminate it from the body, it doesn't actually cause unwholesome results because you're not killing a living being, right? And now the same thing with plants. While we talk about plants as alive, and we tend to refer to them that way, and it's great that we think of them in very fond ways, and we look to make sure that we don't harm plants, they're not living beings. They don't have all five aggregates. They have physical form, but they don't have feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. A plant can't choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and replant itself. So what we've learned over the years is that we're harvesting plants. Like we're harvesting broccoli or cauliflower. We're not actually killing it. We're harvesting it. And what we've learned is that if we harvest trees, we need to plant some too. Because over the years that we were harvesting, and we weren't planting, and this affected the health of our environment where we didn't have fresh air, we didn't have things that we needed in the world because we weren't planting, right? So we can create unwholesome kamma by not making wise decisions. So we can make the wise decision of cutting down a tree, but maybe let's plant 5 or 10. And then that's going to be a wise decision. And we can see that when we cut down that tree, there's no unwholesome results that come to us because it's not a living being. So we use language in a way that it really isn't actually true reality, that in the unenlightened state with our lack of wisdom, we will tend to talk about killing something that isn't actually a living being. So you need to be able to see the truth, and perhaps you might decide to adjust the way you think about this, which may adjust the way that you speak about these things too. So when I talk about eliminating a virus or a bacteria, I talk about eliminating it. I don't talk about killing it because I'm not actually killing anything. I'm just eliminating it out of the body. Or if I'm harvesting a plant, I'm harvesting a plant. I'm not actually killing it. I'm just harvesting the fruit or whatever it is that we're using from the plant. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind as we're talking about this, because what the Buddha is teaching you is to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. What compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, that you would like to have this concern for other beings. Because when you have anger and bitterness and hostility towards other beings and you put that out, that's what's coming back to you. So what this precept is doing, among other things, is it's helping you eliminate craving anger, and ignorance. Because in order to go out and actively kill another being in an intentional killing, you have to have a certain amount of craving, desire, attachment in your mind. There's a longing, yearning, and there's an anger, perhaps, an ill will towards this other being. And now that's coming from the mind's ignorance. So each one of these teachings, it's helping you to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind so that you can get more and more to the peace and joy. Because as long as you're out there causing harm to other beings, this harm is going to come back to you. So what you're going to need to do is take a precept like this and ask yourself questions like, would you do any of these things? Like euthanasia of a human or animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, any government-sponsored killings, and murders. These are all intentional killings. But in some situations, it could potentially be helpful to do these things. In other situations, it's not, right? You need to look at the situation, and this is where moving to a higher consciousness, you can take in the variables and decide for yourself what will be wise in any given situation. I'll take a couple of these and kind of show you what I mean by this. Now, we'll take termination of a pregnancy. Some people think about this as a political decision. I don't think of it that way, a political issue. I think of it as a human decision because we have this technology and there are some situations where it can actually be helpful and it can be really helpful in that situation. And there can be other situations where it maybe isn't. But regardless, whoever makes that decision, it's their decision. It's not for me to tell anybody how they should or shouldn't make a decision about their own body or what they're doing. What I'm sharing with you is the natural law of Kamma so you can see the truth for yourself and then you make whatever decision is best for you. In fact, if somebody came to me as a teacher and said, hey, David, I'm thinking about terminating my pregnancy, what would you suggest? I wouldn't actually tell them yes. I wouldn't tell them no, because it's their decision to make. It's not up to me to decide. I would say, well, if you terminate the pregnancy, this is what you'll experience. If you don't terminate the pregnancy, this is what you experience. And then it's up to them to decide. But I'll share with you how this can be actually helpful in some situations, but maybe in other situations, maybe not. If a woman had a fetus in the womb, and we know through medical technology that there's no way that this fetus could actually live a viable life outside the womb, and it's threatening the life of the woman. In this situation, if she chose to terminate the pregnancy, she's living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because whenever you're practicing loving kindness and compassion, you need to have loving kindness and compassion for this being. If you don't have loving kindness and compassion for this being, then you're not practicing loving kindness and compassion for all beings, right? So if there's a fetus inside the womb and it's threatening the life of the woman, and we know through medical technology that it's never going to live a viable life outside the womb, then a woman might choose to terminate that pregnancy. And that might be what she chooses, right? And that's her choice to be able to make. But in other situations, someone might choose to abort a child or terminate the pregnancy, right? And depending on what someone chooses, they're going to experience a different results. This situation where someone has a fetus in the womb and it's threatening their life and they terminate the pregnancy, this is probably a once in a lifetime situation that is going to occur. But there could be a situation where maybe somebody is regularly getting pregnant, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and they're regularly doing termination of pregnancies. And in this situation, it's going to affect the health of the woman because as she continues to do these medical procedures, each individual termination of the pregnancy is going to affect the health of the body more and more and more and more. And this is the unwholesome results that is coming back to that person as a result of termination of a pregnancy regularly for something like a birth control, rather than just maybe using some kind of contraceptive or something like this. So whether somebody chooses to do that or not, it's up to them. It's their choice. I'm not here to judge somebody. I'm not here to look down on them. If somebody came and told me that they terminated a pregnancy, okay, I'm here to help everybody and anybody. I don't look at that person as being good or bad or anything like that. It's that person's choice to do whatever they would like to do. But in a situation where you're maybe terminating a pregnancy kind of once in a lifetime kind of thing because it's got a fetus in the womb that is going to threaten your own life versus someone who has 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different termination of pregnancies, this is going to produce different results in these situations because there's a cause and effect or action and result. And with the intentional killing of these fetuses, it's going to produce difficulties for the body of this person who's choosing to do this, right? So then there's some other ones here. Let's take a war, right? the natural law of Kamma is functioning at a much higher level than any law of the government. A government can actually say things or suggest things that are actually not based on the natural law of Kamma. So our government could tell us, hey, go fight over there in that war. Go kill those people over there. And if you kill those people, that's just fine with us. And if you kill those people, we're not going to arrest you for murder. But if you come here to our country and you kill somebody in our country, we're going to arrest you for murder and we're going to put you in jail. Right? This is the imperfection of a human law, like what a government creates, because humans are involved in the creation of these laws, so therefore they're going to be imperfect, right? But the natural law of Kamma is functioning at all times, right? If you know the natural law of Kamma, then you understand by going off in that war and killing those people, you're more likely to be killed yourself. Right? You could actually be killed. This is the results of your decisions to go off into battle and actually kill. Whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's their choice, right? But this is the natural law of Kamma, that not only can you be killed, but you can get injured, you can have amputations in the body, you can have mental challenges. When you come back home, you can have difficulties finding housing, finding employment. You might be addicted to drugs or alcohol or other substances. Some people even commit suicide when they come back from war and stuff like this. So these are all the results of our decisions to go off into war and fight in war, that now the natural law of Kamma is affecting us. So whether someone chooses to do that or not is up to them, right? But this is the natural law of Kamma, that you can see why the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Let me give you another example. Say your house is being eaten by termites, and you know that these insects are going to continue to eat at your house. And if they keep eating your home, then you're not going to have a home to live in, right? In this situation, somebody might be like, what do I do? Should I kill these termites, or what should I do? Well, what the Buddha is teaching you here is to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. He's not saying preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's saying, right? He's not saying never kill anything. He's saying live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Well, if you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, if you allowed these termites to continue to eat your home, you're not going to have a home to live in, and the people around you aren't going to have a home to live in. This wouldn't be compassionate. This wouldn't be living compassionately for your welfare. So what you might decide to do is you might get on the internet and do some searches and see, is there a way to eradicate termites without killing them? And you might spend some time compassionately trying to figure this out, right? And now when you do some research and you come back and you realize there's really no way to eliminate termites without killing them. And now you might need to hire somebody to come take care of this. And this is the harm that's coming to these insects because of their lack of wisdom. Because as a human being, we understand that if we eat wood, we can go out into the forest where nobody is going to be affected by this, and we can eat the wood of a tree. But as an insect, it doesn't have that level of consciousness. So it's coming to the home and it's eating the home. And this is one of the challenges of being in the animal world. So now that this animal is causing harm, its Kamma is that harm is coming to it. It's being killed as a result of causing harm to others. So this is that being's Kamma, right? But you've lived compassionately as you tried to figure out, is there a way to get rid of these insects without actually killing them? And what you might come back with is, no, there's not. Or here's another example. Let's just say that somebody breaks into your home. This is like defense and protection. Say somebody breaks into your home. It's maybe 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning and you're sleeping, right? I can guarantee you that they're not there to bring you chocolate and flowers at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? They're breaking into your home. They're now looking to cause harm. And what I would suggest to somebody in this situation is, if you can, get out. Just get out of the house. If they would like to break something or steal something or what have you, go somewhere else, call the police. They have the tools and the equipment and the training to be able to handle that situation. Go somewhere else and just let somebody handle it. Let the police handle it. But this teachings, they're not black and white, right? It's not like in every situation you'd be able to do that. You might look out your window and there's a gang of people outside, right? And it's like unwise to go outside. Or there might be a huge fire and everything's on fire, and maybe you can't go outside. Maybe you're backed up against the corner and there's persons coming at you with a stick or something like that. Right. Well, what I suggest you do is get a bigger stick, right? And cause the least amount of harm as possible in this situation. But it would be not living compassionately for all living beings if you stood there and let this person beat you up or stab you with a knife or otherwise kill you. So if you needed to defend this body, then do that, right? But do it with the least amount of harm as possible. And if you ultimately needed to take this person's life, then that's the harm that's coming to this being as a result of them choosing to do harm. You didn't go out into the world looking to cause harm. You didn't initiate this harm. You're just dealing with this thing that's coming at you, right? So you don't have craving, anger, and ignorance in this situation. You're not going out and actively trying to kill somebody. You're just responding to the situation that you're now in, right? And this is how you can look at these teachings, that they're not black and white. There's this large gray area that you would like to navigate. And it's going to take your mind being calm and peaceful so that you can actually navigate this. Because if you get really fearful and scared in that situation, you're going to make unwise decisions that are going to produce unwholesome results. So this is one of the reasons why the Buddha is teaching you how to keep your mind calm and peaceful so that in these situations, you're not all shaken up and you can access your wisdom and you can make wise decisions that's going to lead to wholesome results. Sometimes people ask me questions about something called a DNR. I don't know if you guys know what this is. It's called a do not resuscitate order, that while you're alive, you can put into place a legal document that tells your family members that if this body dies, that don't bring me back to life, right? Don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. And sometimes people ask me, is this living compassionately for all living beings? And I say, yeah, it is, because you haven't killed anybody. You haven't intentionally killed anyone. You're just choosing that if this body dies, that don't bring me back to life, that you're perfectly comfortable with death and you're not needing them to bring you back to life. So if you have one of these, then you're still practicing this precept. And then sometimes people ask me about plant-based food and being vegan, consuming animal products. Well, if you start training your mind more and more in these teachings, you might get to the point where you decide that you would like to move to a plant-based food supply. If you do that, it's up to you. It's your choice, when or if you ever choose to do that. But when you're eating meat, you are affected by that. Because as you eat meat, there's certain drugs and hormones and toxins that are in the meat, that you're not just eating the flesh of the animal, you're actually eating these drugs and hormones and toxins as well. And they've actually done studies on this, that they've actually taken wild salmon out of clean running streams in places like the USA, and they've tested the flesh. And they found over 90 different substances in the flesh. They found antidepressants, they found cocaine, they found all these different substances because us human beings have been flushing that stuff down the toilet and it's polluted the water. And now even wild salmon and wild fish are actually absorbing this. So not only is manufactured farming injecting a lot of hormones and drugs and bacteria or antibiotics and things like this into the flesh that you're now ingesting, but even in wild environments, these animals are picking this stuff up. So it's not just the flesh of the animal that you're eating these other things too. And it's causing harm to your body, because there's actually more sickness and illness in the body that you're going to see, that when you're eating meat versus plants, you'll actually see that your body's more healthy and your mind is more healthy too, because you're not going to have those drugs and hormones and toxins in the body circulating around and circulating in the mind. So when or if you ever decide you might be interested to move to a plant-based food supply, it's your choice. If you ever choose to do this, I suggest that you do it gradually, that you gradually move over to a plant-based food supply rather than trying to do it really quick and abruptly. Because one of the things that you might look at in order to be able to see this is that human beings actually used to be plant-based eaters. When we were first coming into the world, we exclusively ate plants. And this is what scientists tell us, but we can actually do independent verification of this, that we don't need to believe the scientists, that you can actually look at your teeth and you can see that your teeth are very similar to a cow or a horse, and they are plant-based eaters. Your teeth almost look exactly like a horse or a cow, that we mimic that over the years, our teeth haven't changed. Where like a lion or a tiger, they have very sharp, ripping, tearing teeth because they eat meat exclusively, right? And that's why their teeth are that way. But we we started actually hunting as a result of necessity, that our population, when we were eating plants in the forest, it grew so exponentially that we ran out of plants in the forest, and we saw animals that they were killing other animals and they were eating. So we became scavengers. We started getting together in a group, and we would run the lions away and we would take over their food. And then we started eating the animals that they had killed. And then our population became too much for that we then started doing organizing hunting, that we started getting together in packs, and we would go out and hunt animals, and then we would bring them back and we would eat them that way. And then that wasn't enough. So then we started doing manufactured farming, where now we have people that manufacture animals, and then they kill them each day in order to provide the meat for the world. So it's not just the people that are killing that are experiencing the unwholesome results. It's you too, that when you're eating this flesh, it's actually affecting the health of your body. And if you decide to move to a plant-based food supply, you'll be able to see that the health of the body improves. But when or if you ever choose to do that, it's up to you. Okay, so this is the first precept. Do you guys have any questions on this one? Looks like Drew has a question. For those of you guys online, you can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. So yes, sir.
Is it a case that you really have to give up eating meat to get to the higher stages of enlightenment because you've still got sensual desire?
Each situation is going to be a little bit different. For the large part, a lot of us can move to a plant-based food supply and be just fine, but we need to do that gradually to allow the mind and the body to adjust. But there's going to be some rare situations where people can't fully switch to a plant-based food supply because the body is so dependent on meat that they might have already tried to do that, and working even with doctors and nutritionists and stuff like this, they might find that they just can't get enough of what they need in order to sustain their life. And if they allowed this body to die, it wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So there's going to be some people that are probably going to need to eat a certain amount of meat, particularly in this first generation or two, because we're starting to now switch back to plants. People have figured out that eating meat isn't wise. So more and more people are switching over to plant-based food supply. But it's going to take multiple generations before our bodies adapt to this. There's students that I have that are maybe in their 50s, for example, and they were vegan even when they were in the womb of their mother. Their mother was vegan, and they've never had a piece of meat their entire life, and they don't have to take any supplements or anything. They can eat plant-based food. But there's other people like me. I grew up with meat, so I need to take supplements in order to be able to eat and stay healthy. And there's even situations where occasionally I need to eat like an egg or a little bit of cheese here and there in order to be able to have enough B12. And I've had to do that from time to time. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But remember, this isn't black and white where everybody has to be vegan in order to get to enlightenment, because that would be permanence, right? So it's about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So if you've maybe tried to go plant-based and you're looking at that gradually, you're taking supplements and you're kind of monitoring your health, maybe you're meeting with some health concerns, you try to address that through maybe some supplements or working with some people like doctors or nutritionists, and you just can't solve it. And maybe you need to eat 5% of meat products in order to be able to sustain this life. That could potentially be wise for you, and you're still practicing living compassionately because you don't have sensual desire where you're just doing it for the taste. You don't have craving, anger, and ignorance in this situation. You're only eating it because you have to. And if you had another option, you would prefer not to eat it. But in this situation, you're just choosing to eat it because you're living compassionately for this being that you are. Yep. Okay. Let's see. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So, all right. So let's go to the next one. This is the second precept. These are the words of the Buddha. He says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. Okay, so here he is teaching you not to steal, right? Because we can't cause harm to other people. I mean, we can't cause other people discontentedness. Like, we can't cause people to be angry or frustrated or agitated, but we can cause somebody harm, right? So if I stole somebody's car, I've caused them harm because now they can't go to work. and earn money. They can't take their children to school if they have children. They can't go to the store and buy groceries and bring home supplies. So I've now caused this person harm because I've caused harm maybe to their physical body or their material possessions or their reputation. This is how you can cause harm. So when you cause harm to people, harm is going to come back to you. So if I steal from somebody, this harm is going to come back to me as a result of stealing. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you not to steal. Now, if I steal somebody's car and they get angry or frustrated, they're causing that anger or frustration. But I've created an environment in which their mind is able to now do that, right? So they're causing their own anger because they're craving for their car to be permanent. So the Buddha is teaching you not to steal so that you're not causing harm to others, and then harm won't come back to you. Then, assuming that something can be used or taken, if the Buddha is saying here, awaiting what is given, right? He's talking about all these different things. If you assume that something can be used or taken, this can put you in a situation where you're going to have difficulties. Say that I was in a college class and I was about to turn in this paper to my professor, and now I walk into the classroom and the professor's not there, and I'm getting ready to staple the paper, and I see the stapler on their desk, and I just grab the stapler and I start stapling the paper, and now the professor walks in and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler. What do you got my stapler for?" Right? Well, now in their mind, they're angry. They're frustrated because they're attached to their stapler. They're holding on to it tight, right? And now they don't realize that they're causing their own anger. And now I end up getting a bad grade on my paper. Or maybe they fail me in the entire class, right? Because I assume that this stapler can be used. And now I've just caused harm. I've taken something from this person without actually asking, right? And in this situation, it's going to cause harm, so therefore harm can easily come to me. So what the Buddha is also teaching you to do here is how to navigate the world of unenlightened beings, because there's going to be a lot of people who are attached to their things. And if you just go around and just use things without asking, now you can find yourself into a lot of difficulties. So the Buddha is teaching you to navigate this world more peacefully, right? So instead of that, what I would do is I would wait for the professor to come in and say, "Hey, do you mind if I use your stapler?" And they're either going to say yes or no, right? And if they say yes, great, thank you so much, I'll staple my paper. And if they say no, okay, I appreciate that, and now I'll just go find one somewhere else. Maybe there's another professor that will let me use it. Or maybe I can just go buy one and I can use it that way. But if I assume that this can be used, now I'm putting myself in a situation where I can have difficulties, and I might even fail in this class that I've invested a lot of time and energy into, because this person's emotions are coming up and now they're taking it out on me, right? The Buddha talks here about accepting what is given, right? Accepting what is given. This is like when someone's practicing generosity with you, the Buddha teaches you to accept that generosity, right? Because it's enhancing the quality of their mind. So if grandma wants to give you that sweater at Christmas that you know you'll never actually wear ever, the Buddha teaches you just accept that generosity. It's helping grandmother's mind to let go because she's practicing generosity. But now that you've got that sweater and you know you're not going to ever wear it, maybe you practice generosity and you give it to somebody else. Because the other option is for it to sit in the closet and waste away and nobody ever gets to use it, right? So maybe it goes through 5, 10 different hands, and it's going to find that person that looks at it and they're like, "That is the most beautiful sweater I have ever seen. I'm going to wear it every day of my life," right? And they just enjoy it so much. So in the meantime, 4, 5, 6, 10 different people practice generosity, and this is really good for the quality of people's minds. If grandma gets angry because you gave away the sweater, she wasn't practicing pure generosity. She had an expectation. She was craving and longing. She had a desire for you to wear it. And since you didn't wear it, she got angry. But she caused that anger herself. So sometimes people call this re-gifting, and they think that, oh, it's bad, don't re-gift. Well, the other option is to let it sit in the closet and waste away, and then the resources don't get used by anybody, right? So you can actually share it with other people, and now it'll find somebody that actually is going to enjoy it. But remember, these teachings aren't black and white. If somebody offers you crystal methamphetamine, are you going to accept what is giving? Or if someone gives you cocaine, are you going to accept what is giving? No, you're going to be like, whoa, like, I think I'm good. You keep that for yourself, right? So the Buddha's not teaching you black and white here, right? Even including stealing, right? Or assuming that something can be used or taken. I gave you an example of how to not assume something that can be taken. But say I'm out in the neighborhood and say somebody's cutting their grass or they're doing some yard work, and say I'm walking down the street and they're cut and they've got blood protruding out of their arm, and now they're going to die if this blood doesn't stop. And my neighbor has a piece of cloth on their front porch. I'm going to grab that piece of cloth and I'm going to put a tourniquet on their arm to stop the bleeding, because that's living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And now, after that person's in the ambulance and goes off to the hospital, I'm going to go catch up with the neighbor. I'm going to be like, hey, I grabbed a piece of fabric off your porch. I'm so sorry. I was trying to save this person's life and they're on the way to the hospital. Can I reimburse you for that fabric? I'd like to pay for it. And this neighbor is probably going to say, oh, no worries, don't worry, right? No big deal, right? So these teachings, they're not black and white. You need to be able to use your wisdom, your higher consciousness, to decide what would I do in any situation. And accepting what is given is, in probably 99% of the cases, you can just accept what is given. And this is going to enhance the quality of that person's mind, that they're practicing generosity. Because if you shut down their generosity, they're not going to be interested to practice generosity with you. People are going to stop practicing generosity with you, right? So if you just accept what is given, this is good for their mind and it's good for you too. It's good for everybody. But if somebody offers you something like cocaine, you're not going to accept that, right? So this isn't black and white here. You need to be able to use your higher consciousness and your wisdom to decide what would be wise or unwise. And then the Buddha talks about awaiting what is given. What this is like, say you have a life partner and they're on their way to a business trip and you're like, oh, honey, get me this, get me this, get me this, get me that, get me this. You're putting expectations on that person. And now that person has to go around and try to find all the things that you want. And then when they come back, if they don't have everything you want, you might be agitated or frustrated or annoyed. So instead, what the Buddha is teaching you, it's just await what is given. If somebody offers you something, then that's their choice. But don't expect people to give you something. So this is why, like when you come to a Buddhist temple, we don't send a basket around asking for people to give donations, right? Because this would be an expectation that people would give a donation. So there's never an expectation that somebody should give something. Instead, it's up to each person to decide for themselves if they would like to give or not. And then you just accept what is given without any expectations of anything from anybody. And this is what will help protect your mind, where you're not stealing and you're not taking from people. So any questions on this one that you guys have? No questions? Okay. So let's go to the third one. I'll read this one to you and then I'll help apply it to day-to-day life. Okay? So the Buddha here says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So what he's talking about here is the way you have sexual activity, that if you make unwise decisions around your sexual activity, this could cause harm to others, and now harm is going to come back to you. So he's teaching here this part where he says abandon sexual relations with people who are protected by their family. What he's talking about here is about it would be unwise to have sex with minors. Right? That if we have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child, this person is learning and developing with their family. And now if you can remember when you had sex the first time, it can be a very impactful thing. And now if you have sex with this 8-year-old or 12-year-old child, it's like pulling them away from their family. And now they can't develop their mind in the same way as if they became an adult and had more consensual relations and sexual contact. So in most places in the world, the government has laws about this, right? You can't have sex until you're a certain age, right? In most places in the world. But there are some places in the world that it's legal to have sex with an 8-year-old child. They're not going to arrest you for having sex with someone who's 12 years old. There's places that are like that. But if you look at those places, their political system, their educational system, their economy is really struggling, and they're having all kinds of difficulties. And this is one of the reasons why, is because the young children aren't being able to develop their mind in their life to be able to create a society of people where they're functioning in a certain way, right? So if we have sex with people that are really young, it doesn't give their mind an opportunity to grow and develop in the same way as if you waited until they're older. Right, so that's what the Buddha is teaching here. Where he says whose violation entails a penalty, this would be sex without consent. If you're having sex where you're forcing someone, like raping someone, this is causing harm, and harm can come back to you. You can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get injured, you can get arrested, you can get all kinds of difficulties there. Where the Buddha says abandoning unchastity, do you guys know what chastity is? You guys ever know what that is? Chastity, so in the old days, fathers would put metal underwear on their daughters, and they would have a key. And it was only the father that could open up the key and allow somebody to have sex with their daughter, right? So that would be chastity. That's like no sex whatsoever. Here's the metal underwear on this person, right? That would be chastity. Unchastity would be just the opposite. It was like having sex with lots and lots of people, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you is to abandon that, where you're going around having sex with lots of people. And the reason why is because there's harms that can come from that. That this is where you get sexually transmitted diseases. This is where you can get beat up and injured. People have gotten murdered over these kinds of things because people get attached in sexual relationships, and now people tug and pull at each other. And this is where you can even have your material possessions destroyed. People can get attached to you. Even if people say, yeah, it's okay, you can go have sex with someone else, inside their mind can be attached to you, and now they're holding on, and then when you go off and have sex with someone else, they can get very angry and bitter and harsh, and you can also get sexually transmitted diseases. So this is the cause and effect, or action and result. That's what the Buddha is teaching you here. He's not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. If you go out into the world and have sex with many people, that's your choice, right? But just understand that there's certain consequences for that, and that's what the Buddha is teaching you here, is this cause and effect, or this action and result. In some cultures, you might meet a person, and now when you meet that person, you guys decide you're going to live life together, you're going to have a relationship, but you don't have money to be able to afford a place to stay for yourself. And you might talk to your parents and say, hey, can we move into your house? We're going to save money, and then we're going to move out and get our own place. And in these kinds of situations, your parents or your family has accepted the relationship, and they understand that you guys might be having sex. So in this situation, this doesn't relate to what the Buddha is talking about here, about one who's protected by their mother, father, brother, or sister. So if you live in that kind of culture and you're moving in with your family and they've given you permission to do that, that's not what the Buddha is talking about here. So sex with someone while you're living at home with relatives, if they've accepted your relationship, you would still be practicing this precept. Okay? Sex with someone who's decided to remain celibate, that's where the Buddha is talking about who are protected by teachings. By the time you get to the second stage of enlightenment, you could still be having sex in the second stage of enlightenment, but the mind is not yet enlightened in the second stage of enlightenment. You're still going to be experiencing frustration, agitation, annoyance, and these other things. If you would actually like to get to the point where your mind's no longer experiencing any discontentedness, where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful, you need to get to the fourth stage of enlightenment. That's the actual enlightened mind in the fourth stage. So moving from the second stage to the third and fourth stage, someone would ultimately let go of sexual contact. You might not be at that situation right now, depending on what your age is or what you've experienced in your life. You might still be enjoying a sexual relationship and choosing to do that. And you can get to the second stage of enlightenment and hang out there and still be having a sexual relationship and be just fine. Your discontentedness will be significantly reduced, but you're still going to have some discontentedness, particularly around sex, because in some cases you're going to be able to have sex and you're going to feel happy and great and wonderful. But in some situations, you're not going to be able to have sex and you're going to be agitated and frustrated or annoyed. And this is the reason why, is because there's this craving, desire, attachment. The mind is wanting something and it's not getting it. So there's some people who have decided that they're not interested in having sex anymore, and they're making their way to the fourth stage of enlightenment, and they're making their way towards that by choosing to remain celibate. And if you ended up having sex with that person, it's actually causing harm, because that person getting to enlightenment would be the very best thing for them, and it would be the very best thing for the community, because having a person in the world that is enlightened, it's very wonderful because everybody can learn from that person of how they actually did it. So if you tried to lure somebody away from their vow of celibacy, then this would actually cause harm to that person, and it would cause harm to the greater community, because now there's not that person in the community that's able to get to enlightenment. So here in Thailand, they make this really easy for you, that anybody who's wearing an orange robe and shaving their hair, they're choosing to not have sex with anybody, right? So you wouldn't be interested in having sex with those kind of people. And then also in Thailand, if you're wearing all white, then those people are usually choosing not to have sex either. And this isn't like an advertisement. Like I don't have sex anymore, but I don't wear white because I'm trying to advertise that I don't have sex. Because if somebody tried to entice me into having sex, I just wouldn't have an interest to do that at this point in my life. But in Thailand, they do make it easy for you that if you're wearing all white and that's something you wear every single day, and same thing like if you're wearing orange robes and things like this, you know that those people aren't interested in having sex. And then if you are interested in having sex, you would just find somebody who's not wearing those kinds of clothing, right? And this makes it really easy for you. So if you're choosing to have sex, you're not doing anything wrong. It's not immoral, right? You might decide to do that. But at some point in your life, you're probably going to choose to let this go. You know, oftentimes when we're young, sex is really wonderful and we think like, wow, we're going to be on our deathbed still having sex because it's that wonderful. But I can assure you that there's very few people on their deathbed still having sex, that you're going to probably at some point, you're going to be like, you know, been there, done that enough times. I'm going to let this go now. Like, I don't really need to do this anymore, right? Because you've done it enough ways, enough times, enough situations, and you tend to move away from those kinds of things. So when or if you ever choose to do that, it's your choice, but you can actually get to that second stage of enlightenment and hang out there for a while, and you'll have a wonderful life in that second stage of enlightenment because your discontentedness will be significantly reduced. But then at some point, if you decide you'd like to move to the enlightened mind, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, who knows, it's up to you. Then you might decide to go further and choose to let go of sex after you've had enough of that, if that's what you choose. So the Buddha here is teaching you to not have sex with someone who's choosing to be celibate. Then here the Buddha is talking about even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement, or who have a husband, wife, or partner, right? That's what these two are. If someone's in a committed relationship with someone else and you kind of lure them away from that, this is going to cause problems. This is where people get beat up. They get murdered. You lose your reputation in the community. These are all the consequences of our decisions to make unwise decisions, to have sex in that way. Then we can experience these results. Or if you're in a committed relationship and you choose to go outside of it, this is where you can get sexually transmitted diseases. You can get in fights and arguments, beat up, and people even got murdered over these kinds of things. So that's why the Buddha is teaching that. People are human trafficked. These are people who are being forced to have sex. And if you go into that environment and you're paying and these people that are being forced to have sex, again, you can get robbed, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. These are all the results of those decisions. Okay? And then a few more things on this. Anytime you're going into a paid sexual service environment, this is unchastity, because you and the other people are having sex with multiple people. And now this is where you can, again, get sexually transmitted diseases. You can get beat up in those environments. You can get murdered. You can get robbed. These people can rob you potentially of money. These are all things that can actually happen as a result of that choice. Notice that the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships in this precept, that he doesn't talk about that being harmful, right? He was aware of same-gender relationships during his lifetime because he mentions it essentially in his teachings. Ever since the beginning of time, people have been having sex with opposite gender, but also same gender too. There's never been a time where all women had sex with men and all men had sex with women, because we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that not every man is interested in having sex with a woman, and not every woman is interested in having sex with a man. But what you got to ask yourself is, where is the harm? If there's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, they're not causing any harm to anybody. So if there's a male and a female that's choosing to have sex, they're loyal, loving, consenting adults, they're not causing harm. And the same thing is true about two men or two women. They're loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, right? So this is how wise the Buddha was during his lifetime, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. He already understood that same-gender relationships aren't causing harm. And that's why he didn't include it in this particular precept. So right now, today, we have plenty of people in the world that understand this, but we also have lots of people that don't understand this, right? And people have craving. They're craving permanence. They want every man to have sex with a woman, and they want every woman to have sex with a man. This is permanence, and it just doesn't exist. And when they don't get their craving fulfilled, their anger and hostility arises, their ill will. And where this is coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So if you're someone who prefers same-gender relationships, or you know someone who does, it's completely normal. It's been going on since the beginning of time. You're not doing anything wrong or unwise. If that's what you prefer, then that's your choice. And the Buddha is giving you guidance here to do this in a safe way that you're not causing harm to others. And then we can also look at transgender individuals, and we can understand this through the teachings of the Buddha. If you understand that the body is one thing and the mind is something else, and these two things coming together, they're not going to always match in gender. So an individual could have a body that is of one gender, and their mind could be identifying as a different gender. If every single mind that came into a body identified with the same organs, sexual organs of the body, this would be permanence. That every single mind that comes into a body, it identifies with the same sexual organs as the body. That would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence. So this isn't possible. It's never happened since the beginning of time. There's been people who have sexual organs of one gender, and their mind is identifying as something different. This is the universal truth of impermanence. And also, if you understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different beings in the past, this is understandable through that too. Because we've all been different beings in the past, and this is something that you can actually independently verify, that we are all living in this cycle of rebirth, continually being reborn over and over and over again. So perhaps somebody has been in the past female, 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 and now that mind has ended up in a male body, and now their mind is identifying as a female, but the body is having male sexual organs. And the same thing could happen where someone is male, 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 and now their mind comes into a female body that has female organs, but their mind identifies as a male. This is completely normal. It's been happening since the beginning of time. So if you're a transgender individual, or you know someone who is, it's completely normal. They haven't done anything wrong or harmful. It's just completely normal based on the natural laws of existence, of the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth. Now, people might judge those individuals or look down on them or think that there's something wrong, but you can have more wisdom and realize that it's completely normal based on these natural laws. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation, and they ask questions about this because they would like to know how this fits in. Well, masturbation is one of those things that it's not always unwise, and it's not always wise either. You have to look at what you're doing with the masturbation. First of all, you're not causing harm to any other being by choosing to masturbate, right? Because you're the only one involved. But there's the ability to potentially use masturbation in a helpful way, but it could also be harmful too. Let me give you some examples. So if somebody has a lot of sexual craving in their mind, say they have 10 different boyfriends or girlfriends, and maybe they're listening to this talk and they're like, you know what? I shouldn't have so many sexual partners. I should bring that down to one person. That's going to be more wise for me, right? And now when they bring it down to one person, they have all this sexual craving in their mind, and it's really difficult for them to deal with. But now maybe they use a little bit of masturbation in order to release that sexual craving out of their mind, and that has allowed them to now have just one partner. And now they're choosing to have just one partner. So this is a way to use masturbation in a very helpful way. Or say somebody is wanting to rape somebody. They're longing, yearning for sex, and they want to go out and rape somebody. But instead, they decide to do some masturbation. This has been helpful, right? Because they chose not to rape somebody. Instead, they chose to masturbate, right? So masturbation can be used in these kinds of situations to bring down the sensual desire and release it from the mind. But if you get addicted to masturbation, where you're masturbating 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day, this is actually increasing your sensual desire. And this can actually cause harm to your own mind because you're allowing the sensual desire to continue. So masturbation is something that can kind of release the sensual desire out of your mind and kind of make your mind a bit more comfortable. But if you get addicted to it, it can cause harm. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be masturbating at all because your mind will be perfectly peaceful and joyful regardless of what's going on in the world. But if you guys know anything about dams, I don't know if you guys have studied dams before. A dam is like a big structure that's holding back water. Oftentimes these are like multi-million-dollar projects. And what they do is oftentimes the water comes up on the dam and it becomes to the point where it's putting more and more pressure on the dam. One of the things they do to be able to protect the dam is they open up the dam and they let the water out. And now the water goes down and then they close the dam again. So as the water builds up and it adds pressure to the dam, they will release the dam and that releases the water and now they can close the dam again and it protects the dam and it keeps the dam safe so that they don't have to rebuild this multi-million-dollar structure. So as you're eliminating certain cravings in your mind, it's the same kind of thing. You can feel all this pressure building up in your mind. So if you're trying to get rid of sexual desire, for example, you might go a week or two without sex, and now you notice that there's this pressure in the mind that's building up, and you might use some masturbation in order to help you. And now you do a little bit of masturbation, your sexual craving comes down, and now instead of 2 weeks, maybe you go 4 weeks without any sexual contact. And now maybe you use a little bit of masturbation at that point to bring the craving down. And now maybe you go 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 weeks. And then maybe you need a little bit of masturbation there to kind of help you bring the pressure down, right? And this is what you can do. But if you get addicted to it, this is something that's going to cause difficulties within your own mind. So you just got to kind of know what you're doing. Are you working to eliminate sensual desire, or is it increasing your sensual desire? Okay. Then there's sex with animals. This is probably one of the few things that it's black and white, right? Like an animal can't give us consent. I imagine if somebody did that, they would probably get disease or illness. They could probably get injured by doing those kinds of things. So this is like a black and white one. Sometimes people ask me about this. And then sometimes people ask about pornography. With pornography, if you decide to go in that direction, the mind is getting this pleasure through the eyes. And then sometimes there's the hearing as well, that you hear certain sounds through the pornography if you're watching videos. And then there might even be masturbation involved, where what somebody really wants in this situation is they want to have intimacy with somebody, but maybe they can't. So they go in the direction of pornography. But if you go down this world, it's kind of like a fantasy world. And the more you get deeper and deeper into that, when you decide that you would like to come out, it's actually quite challenging to kind of get away from that. The mind gets addicted to it. And then oftentimes your interactions with a human being aren't as fulfilling as they once were. So what I would encourage people to do is, if they're interested in intimacy, is to go in the direction of an actual human being rather than the direction of pornography. Because once you go down that path, it's really hard to come out. And even when you do come out, it's hard to kind of regain this pleasure in this environment with an actual human being, because it can never really fulfill the same fantasies that you were having when you were indulging in pornography. So again, whether you choose to do this or not is up to you. There are techniques to be able to help you eliminate your sexual craving. There's meditation to help you do that, because as long as you have really strong sexual craving in your mind, you'll be agitated and frustrated at different times. Okay, so this is the third precept. Any questions on this one? Sometimes there's lots of questions on this one. Right? This is a big topic. All right. I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay. So now let's go to the next one, which is number 4. This one's really straightforward, easy to explain. So abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. Okay. So the Buddha here is talking about ensuring that when you speak the truth. And he's giving you the reasons why right in the teaching, is that you would like to be trustworthy, dependable, reliable, right? If you're lying, people are going to discover those lies, whether they're personal, professional relationships, and now those relationships are going to struggle. And if you've ever done a lot of lying, your mind had to figure out, what did I say to one person versus another, and your mind had to consciously figure this out, and your mind might have been obsessively trying to think about what you said to one person to another. So if you eliminate all your lying and you just speak the truth, then you never have to worry. You can just look internally, what's the truth, and now speak that. So all these precepts are helping you to eliminate the cravings in your mind, right? Because when you're lying, there's something that your mind wants that if you tell the truth, you're not going to get it. So the mind lies in order to get what it wants, right? So if you can tell the truth, then your mind can eliminate its cravings, right? The Buddha understood this precept so closely that I've inserted this other teaching for you to be able to see what he's talking about. Here he's teaching his son. Sometimes people think that the Buddha left his family and he never came back, but this isn't actually true. He actually came back, and his son and his wife and his stepmother and other people like this came and ordained with him to learn with him, where here he's teaching his son that even when you tell a joke, it would be unwise to tell a lie, that you shouldn't tell a lie. Right? And the reason why is because people are going to not trust you. They're not going to see you as dependable. If you can imagine this really wise person, the Buddha, who's teaching in classes like this and explaining to you the truth, but then on the side, if he was lying, this wouldn't look very well, and people wouldn't know whether he's being truthful in his classes or not. So if you would like to bring your practice up to the point where you're always telling the truth, even when you tell a joke, this is going to be more challenging for you. You're going to need more wisdom to be able to create jokes that are truthful, but usually those are more funny, right? People laugh at those a lot more. And when you actually get used to doing this, where you tell jokes that are truthful, it'll actually become easier and easier for you to do this. So this is something you might consider, is just to always tell the truth. And this is going to help you to eliminate cravings, and it's going to help you to be dependable and reliable and trustworthy in all your relationships. So any questions on this one? Okay. So let me get to the last one here, which here's the words of the Buddha. Refrain from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, as I mentioned, you like to investigate them and examine them. If you ever run across words that you don't understand, it's important to look them up, right? This word heedlessness, you might not know what it means. You might need to go look it up. I didn't know what it meant when I saw it. I kind of assumed I knew what it meant, but I wasn't interested in assuming. So I went and looked it up. What it means is this: careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful, right? So if you're putting a substance in the body that's producing a lack of awareness of the mind, this is actually going to work against you, because in order to get to enlightenment, you need to have full awareness of your mind. If you're taking in substances, any substance that's producing a lack of mindfulness or awareness of mind, it's going to produce unwise decisions, because when you don't have awareness of your mind, you're going to make unwise decisions. This is why, like, if you go to a prison and you talk to the people and you ask them, like, hey, why are you in prison? They might say, oh, I'm here for murder, or I'm here for robbery, or something like this. But if you really talk to them and you say, like, really, why are you here? They'll tell you it's because of substances. That if they didn't have that addiction, they would have never robbed that bank. Or if they weren't high on drugs, they would have never killed that person. And why they're really there is because of these substances. Because once you pollute your mind with any kind of substance, you're now going to be more likely to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, and to lie. Right? So the Buddha is teaching you not to pollute the mind and give your mind the best opportunity to be able to make wise decisions in the world. So we need to look at some different substances, because this isn't black and white again, right? So we can look at something like marijuana and we can see that undoubtedly this plant has medical properties to it. There's research where they've taken children who have 20 seizures a day, and they give this child a little bit of CBD oil on the tongue, and it doesn't have another seizure for like 6 months, just from one little drop of the CBD oil on their tongue, right? So this plant can produce a high, and some people do take it for that reasons. And you need to be able to see for yourself what it is that you're doing with this plant. If you're looking for the medical properties of this plant, you're usually looking for a high CBD. There's two different parts of the plant, the CBD and the THC. So the CBD is the part that is the medical properties. The THC is the part that produces the high. So if you're looking for a high, you're usually looking for a high THC, and you might even be smoking it in order to ingest it, which is causing harm to the lungs. Right? So if you're looking for medical properties, you're probably looking for a high CBD, and you might ingest it as an edible or a oil or something like this. But you need to be sure you have a real valid medical purpose, because if you're taking this for stress or anxiety, it's not going to eliminate your stress or anxiety, because it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing the stress and anxiety. Now, this can make it kind of feel like it's not there for a period of time as long as you're high on this substance, but you haven't actually solved the underlying problem that's causing the stress and anxiety, the craving, desire, attachment. So you need to be sure you have a really valid purpose for using marijuana. If you're having trouble sleeping or things like this, that's because of craving, desire, attachment in the mind. You can purify the mind and improve all of that kind of stuff. So you need to pay attention to that. Cigarettes, we know that they don't have any medical purpose in the world, and this is why more and more people have moved away from them. But there was a period of time where a lot of people smoked cigarettes, and they were experiencing the unwholesome results of that because of the chemicals and the drugs that are in those cigarettes. It was causing harm to the lungs, right? And it was causing harm to the throat and other parts of the body. And even secondhand smoke can be causing harm to others, the people around you, right? So cigarettes, we know, doesn't have any medical purpose, so it would be unwise to take those. You need to pay attention to prescription medications, because there's some prescriptions that can actually be addictive. So if a doctor is prescribing you a medicine, you'd probably like to do a little research on that and see if it's addictive. And if it is, there might be an alternative. And you can say, hey, doctor, do you have something else that you can help me with here? But in some situations, that might be the only medication. And in that situation, if you know it's addictive, you can just use it for a limited period of time and get off of it as soon as possible, because that way you won't get addicted to it. And then you're going to probably even be interested to look at your caffeine intake. Caffeine is a stimulant. It's a drug. It produces overactivity in the mind. And if you're ingesting caffeine, it's going to produce heedlessness. It's not the same as crystal methamphetamine or heroin or anything like that, but it's still producing overactivity in the mind and heedlessness. And you'll notice that your mind can be overactive and excited. One of the things that caffeine does is it lifts up your energy, but then you're going to drop off on the other side. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all day long. There's natural energy. You don't get tired. You don't get exhausted. You get sleepy where you need to go to sleep, but you don't get exhausted. Right now, you might get exhausted at the end of your day, because if you go through your day and all your cravings are getting fulfilled, you're like, wow, this was a great day. This was really good. Everything was wonderful. But if you go through your day and your cravings aren't getting fulfilled, you might be like, this was such a horrible day. It was so horrible. It was hectic. That's because the mind isn't getting its cravings fulfilled. And you get to the end of your day and you might feel exhausted and tired, like you're carrying around a bunch of bricks on your feet or on your shoulders. So if you're interested in getting to sustainable energy, where you can just have energy all day long, you're going to need to look at your caffeine intake, because as you take caffeine, it's going to lift up your mind and it's going to be overactive and be like a stimulant, but then it's going to drop off and you're never allowing your mind to develop the natural energy. So this might be something that you need to gradually do. You might gradually need to move away from it. And as you do, you're going to experience withdrawal symptoms, just like a drug. Right? You're going to potentially experience shakes. You're going to experience headaches. You might have dry mouth. You might notice these things. You might get really drowsy during your day. This is the withdrawal symptoms of detoxing from the caffeine. But as you choose to do that, you'll eventually get to the other side of those withdrawal symptoms, and you'll have sustainable energy all throughout your day. You won't be reliant on this caffeine, where you can only have caffeine, or you can only have energy when you have caffeine. That's allowing your mind to be attached to this substance. So this might be something you just choose to look at. You might even look at sugar, that taking in sugar in excess can produce a high. And pretty much when we're children, we see that and we stop doing that kind of stuff. But if you're noticing that you're taking in a lot of sugar and you're getting these highs, you're going to need to pay attention to that too. Some people will tell you that psychedelic substances will help you to actually get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. Psychedelic substances do promote certain introspection in the mind that kind of mimics a little bit of what it's like to be making your way to enlightenment, but you'll never actually get to enlightenment as long as you're using psychedelic substances. Using psychedelic substances is kind of like you're out on the sidewalk and you're doing window shopping in the store and you see this really nice handbag inside the store and you would like to go in and get the handbag and touch it and look at it and feel it and potentially purchase it. But you can't because you're chained down to the sidewalk outside. So these psychedelic substances, you can kind of look at being introspective and what it looks like, but you can't actually ever really accomplish it for yourself because you're reliant on these substances. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be introspective and have this inward looking eye and kind of develop and cultivate the mind at all times during your day. If you can only be introspective when you're taking psychedelic substances, then your mind isn't developing this quality to be able to cultivate the mind at all times during your day and be introspective at all times. So even though people might tell you that psychedelic substances are somehow helping you to get to enlightenment, it's actually taking you in the opposite direction because your mind's not able to cultivate that introspection that you need in order to be able to cultivate the mind and actually get to enlightenment. So this isn't an exhaustive list here. These are just a couple of things that people tend to ask me about. So that's why I included them here. But the way the teachings of the Buddha is they're timeless. If you understand this word heedlessness, you can apply it now until the end of time. Because the Buddha could have never imagined that we would have created something called LSD, for example, because this is chemically based, right? 2,500 years ago, he would have never had insight to that. But he taught in such a way that his teachings are timeless. That's why he uses this word heedlessness, that if now and forever, any substance that you come across that is producing heedlessness, you know to be unwise to take it. Like some people even huff paint. I don't know if you guys know about this. They take a bag and they spray paint into a bag and then they huff the fumes and they get high on this kind of stuff, right? So it doesn't matter what substance there is, you can apply these teachings now and forever throughout time. And that is explaining to you that it would be unwise to promote a lack of mindfulness or a lack of awareness in your mind, because then it's going to lead to unwise decisions. So do you guys have any questions on this one? Yes, sir.
I mean, to me, this precept's quite black and white and easy to understand. I'm just wondering, when I look around in Thailand and I look at the Thai people, I obviously still see a lot who drink, who smoke, who drink coffee. Is there any justification these people use, who are clearly Buddhist, that this is okay, or is it a case that it's their personal choice and they've decided that's what they're going to do?
Yeah, you can understand this as impermanence, because not everybody's going to understand the teachings in the same way. Not everybody's going to be practicing them exactly the same way. So it's not like Thailand is going to outlaw all caffeine and everything else. Like everything that you can imagine, it's here. You can come here, you can pay for sex, you can get drugs and alcohol, you can do all these things, but it's your choices that are going to decide. As you go through those things, you're going to enter into the dark side, right? And now you're going to experience the darkness of those kinds of things when you go into those directions. So everybody in Thailand isn't necessarily learning and practicing the teachings closely, because what I'm teaching you is the formal learning to understand. But the average Thai person doesn't study these teachings formally, because as we were talking, I think you were here when I was explaining how the Pali Canon is in 45 large volumes of books, and the average Thai person doesn't have access to it because it's so expensive to print out, where what we've done is we've consolidated it and we've given it away for free. So more and more people can learn it, but not everybody has learned it and not everybody's practicing it. The average Thai person does know a fair amount of the teachings, but they're not necessarily practicing them to the level of depth that I'm teaching you, that this is what it takes to get to enlightenment. But not every Thai person understands that. So that's why you see a lot of meat consumption here, and you see things like this, but you also see the consequences of that Thai people have a high rate of stomach cancer here in Thailand because they eat so much meat and grilled meat. And this is one of the misunderstandings that they're having here, is that they're not understanding that it's unwise to eat meat. So you'll see these in any community, that not everybody's practicing the teachings the same, because everybody is a work in progress, and it's up to each person to take responsibility for their own practice and make choices for themselves. Even students, sometimes they will invite me out because they would like to have a conversation, and they will say, "Hey David, can you meet me at this coffee shop?" And I say, "Sure, I'll meet you at the coffee shop." Right? We'll go into the store, in the coffee shop. I'll order water or a smoothie, or I just won't get anything. I'll just sit there and I'll just help them, because this is where they're at in their life, and I need to meet them where they're at. I've even been with students before, and they've sat down and had a beer. Right? They're not offending me. They're not hurting me. They're the ones who are drinking. So each person's at a different point in their practice, and we just need to not judge people for where they are, and just everybody's a work in progress. But if you're really interested in getting to enlightenment, as I'm teaching, this is the guidance that you would need. But you won't see everybody practicing that, because that's impermanence. All right. So it looks like everybody's questions have been taken care of. I don't see any online either. I don't see any here. So it's now basically about 12:30. This afternoon, we're going to get together at 2 o'clock in order to do walking meditation. Walking meditation is really good if you have an overactive mind and you find it hard to be still and be calm. If you have anxiety in your mind, this is really good for that. So I'm going to teach that this afternoon. It's very intentional walking. It'll take me all of about 10 minutes to teach it to you. And then I'm going to get you guys going in walking meditation and give you guys a chance to practice it for a good 20 minutes or so. So if you'd like to learn walking meditation, this is going to be at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So we're going to take about an hour and a half lunch break. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for your interest to learn. And if you'd like to learn more, I'm going to start back at 2 o'clock. So have a really lovely lunch, or whatever you choose to do throughout your day. And perhaps we'll see you guys later. Okay? Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.